On an early spring morning in the Carpathian Nature Reserve, nestled among the dense forests and steep slopes of western Ukraine, the morning mist gently settled among the centuries-old pine trees. In this realm of silence and greenery, under the shade of mighty trees, two brown bears moved slowly. A large male with thick, dark brown fur walked ahead, his movements confident but cautious, as if he were guarding something precious. Behind him followed a female, her light brown eyes shining softly in the morning light, her huge belly swaying with each step, betraying her difficult condition. The forest seemed especially quiet that morning, as if nature was holding its breath in anticipation of a miracle. The female, whom the local reserve staff affectionately nicknamed Zoriana for her light, almost golden fur, attracted the attention of all the workers. Her unusually large belly caused concern and curiosity. The care of the pair of bears was entrusted to a young biologist named Taurus, a man whose love of nature bordered on obsession. Taurus had already spent several years in the Carpathians studying the behavior of wild animals, but this pair of bears was special to him. Every morning Taurus went into the forest with a backpack full of fresh fish to feed Zoriana. He knew that she needed more nutrients during her pregnancy. The male, whom the staff called Grom, Thunder, because of his powerful roar, always raised his head warily, sniffing at Taurus's scent. Zoriana, though she kept slightly behind, never showed any aggression. Over time, the bears got used to Taurus's presence, and his footsteps no longer alarmed them. He always kept a safe distance, watching the pair through binoculars and taking notes in a worn notebook. However, Taurus remained concerned. Zoriana's belly grew larger every day, and its size seemed abnormal even compared to other pregnant bears in the reserve. The reserve's veterinarian, an experienced woman named Olena, warned that such a pregnancy could be associated with complications. She advised Taurus to keep a close eye on her so that he could spot any signs of trouble in time. Sometimes in the mornings, Taurus noticed that Zoriana was breathing more heavily than usual, her sides trembling as if she were struggling with pain. Grom stayed close to her at such moments, growling quietly if Taurus came too close. But the biologist spoke to the bear in a calm, low voice, and it calmed down, as if understanding. The other employees of the reserve also watched the pair of bears with interest. They understood that it was necessary to interfere in the lives of wild animals with caution. But Zoriana's huge belly attracted attention. The fur on her belly began to thin, revealing pink skin stretched tight like a drum. Everyone discussed that this was probably a rare case of multiple pregnancy. Usually female bears give birth to 1 or 2 cubs, but Zoriana was already past the 8th month of pregnancy, which was unusually long. Taurus kept detailed records. He measured the air temperature, monitored Zoriana's behavior, and checked how the cubs were moving in her belly. He became so attached to the bears that they became almost like family to him. On rainy days, he stretched a tarpaulin over the place where the bears liked to rest to protect them from the damp. Sometimes he brought a first aid kit with him, ready for any surprises. At first, Grom was wary of the smell of medicine, but over time he got used to it and stopped growling. Every time Taurus brought fresh fish, Zoriana struggled to get up, her eyes lighting up with anticipation. Grom always waited until she was full before approaching the remaining food. Taurus was touched by this care, seeing true devotion in the male's behavior. He often joked with his colleagues that Grom was a true gentleman, always giving his lady the best, but the anxiety grew. One morning, Zoriana suddenly let out a quiet moan and lay down on the grass, refusing to move. Taurus, noticing this, hurried to check on her condition. He was afraid that these might be pre-birth contractions. After a few minutes, the pain seemed to subside, and Zoriana, breathing heavily, fell asleep. Grom surrounded her, gently licking her muzzle, as if to calm her. Taurus recorded this incident, realizing that the birth was imminent. At night, Taurus often stayed in the forest, armed with a flashlight and a warm blanket. He walked around the territory, checking that everything was okay with the bears. Colleagues at the reserve had already nicknamed Zoriana Golden Star because of her shiny fur and huge belly. They teased Taurus, calling him Bear Dad, but he just smiled, hiding his growing anxiety. One cool morning, when the forest was still shrouded in thick fog, Grom suddenly let out a loud roar. Taurus, who was in his hut nearby, immediately realized that something was wrong. He grabbed his medical kit and rushed to the place where the bears usually stayed. There he saw Zoriana lying on the ground. Her breathing was heavy, her face contorted with pain, and her stomach was contracting rhythmically. Labor had begun. Grom paced around, growling lowly, but showed no aggression. Taurus called for help on the radio and cautiously approached Zoriana. He stroked her head, whispering soothing words, although his heart was pounding with excitement. Zoriana looked at him with her big eyes, and at that moment, Taurus felt that she trusted him. Soon, Elena and several other employees arrived. They prepared syringes with drugs to ease the birth and instruments for emergency care. Zoriana let out a loud groan. Her body tensed, and soon a faint squeak was heard. The first cub was born. It was tiny, covered in wet fur, but alive. The employees breathed a sigh of relief, but the birth continued. Zoriana tensed up again, and the second cub slipped out onto the grass, moving weakly. To everyone's surprise, the contractions did not stop. The third cub was born, causing astonished exclamations, but Zoriana continued to push, and soon the fourth cub appeared. Taurus and Elena looked at each other, not believing their eyes. Female bears rarely give birth to more than 2 cubs, but that was not the end. After another strong contraction, Zoriana gave birth to a 5th cub. The forest seemed to freeze, and the reserve staff stood stunned by this miracle. Taurus, holding back tears of joy, carefully wiped each cub, removing the mucus and checking their condition. Grom let out a long roar, as if announcing the birth of his children to the forest. Zoriana lay on the grass, breathing heavily, her eyes shining with fatigue and maternal pride. Taurus gave her a restorative drug to prevent complications, and together with his colleagues, created a cozy space for the bear to rest. 5 tiny cubs, still blind, huddled close to their mother, seeking her warmth. Zoriana growled softly, calling them to her to feed them. Grom sniffed each cub carefully, his movements full of tenderness. Taurus and his colleagues, tired but happy, watched this scene, unable to take their eyes off it. The news of the birth of 5 cubs quickly spread throughout the reserve. Employees and even local residents came to see this miracle, keeping a safe distance. Zoriana and her family were nicknamed the Carpathian Miracle, and Taurus was called a hero, although he modestly dismissed the praise. He just stroked Zoriana's head and whispered, "Well done, girl, you did it." When the fog cleared, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the forest, and the bear family began their journey into a new life. Zoriana slowly got up, her belly still large but no longer so heavy. The 5 cubs clumsily hobbled behind her, clinging to her fur. Grom walked alongside, carefully watching his cubs' every step. Before disappearing into the forest, Zoriana turned and looked at Taurus. Her gaze was full of gratitude, and Taurus smiled and waved goodbye. This story about Zoriana, Grom and their 5 cubs became a legend in the Carpathian Reserve. It reminded everyone how closely connected humans and nature are, and how care and love can work wonders. Taurus continued to watch over the bear family, and every time he saw the cubs grow, he felt that he had become part of something bigger. The Carpathian Forest kept this story alive, and it was passed on by word of mouth, inspiring everyone who heard it. Thank you for reading this story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to share it and support our work so that we can tell even more stories about animal rescue.